Welcome everyone to our first official live stream for GWPP this year. And we are here with some amazing women who we're going to get introduced to as we dive into the questions here. But I am Amanda Prochaska. I'm the founder of Wonder Services and a remarkable organization of women called Global Women Procurement Professionals, or GWPP. And we're together today because A, it's Women's History Month, and B, it's also Procurement Month. I don't know how many people actually understand that, but it is. So if you're a woman in procurement, this is our month to be celebrated and to shine brightly. And so what I want to do here, I'm going to bring up some slides just to kick us off. Maybe if I can find them. So give me 1 second. Actually, while I'm pulling this up, you want to do a quick round of introductions so we can get to know each of you on the call today? And Kathleen, can we start with you real quick?
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, Kathleen Hemberg here. I am the Senior Director of Corporate Procurement here at Inspire Brands. I support everything that we purchase that stand up our corporate functions. So I guess you could also call it indirect procurement too.
Awesome. And Susan.
Yes, hello, I'm Susan Patrick Harris. No relation to Neil, although I wish I was related. I work for R1 RCM, which is a revenue cycle management company, and I work from my home in the Nashville, Tennessee area. Glad to be here with everybody today. And I'm the Vice President of Procurement.
Okay. And Deborah.
Yep. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here today. I'm Deborah Augustus. I am the Director of Indirect Goods and Services, which is very similar, I think, to what Kathleen was describing. I work for Integra Life Sciences in Princeton, New Jersey. We're a medical device company supporting tissue technologies and surgical care. Been there about 3 years and loving procurement for over 20 years. So thanks for having me.
All right. And whenever you go live, something always goes wrong. Dogs barking, kids in the background, or slides that will not come up because Adobe is making me sign in. So we're going to kind of run with this. And, but just before we dive into kind of the questions, we have an amazing conversation plan today. But for those who are joining us for the first time and maybe hearing about GWPP for the first time, just a little bit of a background of what that is and why it came about. So back in 2018, it was originally founded because two women, and you guys will get a kick out of this, two women worked in San Francisco, had the exact same title. They were both VPs of procurement. They worked literally 2 blocks away from each other, doing essentially the same work, and didn't know each other. And to me, it's like we have such power individually. Like we do great work as individuals within procurement, but how much more effective could we be if we built a community of women where we could share our learnings, uplift others along the way, and maybe pave a path forward in a profession that makes it easier for women to get into in the future. So that was the premise around GWPP. If you ever see us, look us up on LinkedIn. That's where the membership is. We just hit 8,000 individuals in our group last week. And the logo is a hummingbird because hummingbirds are diverse. They're tiny but mighty, and they're beautiful at the same time, which really represents all of women in procurement. So that is a little bit about GWPP. There's a lovely slide about it, but hopefully I did it justice. And we also have events coming up, which we will drop in the LinkedIn live so you guys can all see the upcoming events that we have within GWPP. We do these either online or in person because community really matters. A lot of women, and we're going to touch on this today, a lot of women are feeling a little bit overwhelmed, a little bit burnt out. We've been told for a long time that we need to have balance in our lives, which I think most of us are finding out that's a mythical creature, kind of like this unicorn behind me. And so we want to talk about how we're managing our day-to-day lives, how we're growing others and being successful in our careers. And you three today are amazing examples of all of the above. So what do you guys say? Should we get into the questions? Yeah? All right. All right, Susan, you're first.
Woohoo.
All right. What strategies have you used to advance into senior leadership roles within procurement and supply chain?
Yeah, absolutely. First off, thanks, Amanda, for having us all today. And you are
You're welcome.
also a rock star. We really
Thank
appreciate
you.
being here with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, as I think about my career and kind of how I've been able to progress and get promotions and take those next steps that are so exciting, I think oftentimes I've tried to position myself as a business analyst, right? Procurement sometimes can be like a weird, dirty word, and people don't understand what it means. And they think because they've slept in a Holiday Inn the night before, everybody can do procurement, right? I'm an expert in buying things. And so I really try to think about, who in the business is going to do as many contracts in a year as I am? No one. Who's going to talk to as many vendors as I am? No one, right? Or my team, right? And so thinking through what those interactions look like, no one but procurement sits at the most interesting intersection of company goals, right? And understanding what your company wants to do and what the different levers are that you can pull to help your organization reach those goals. We sit at such a unique and interesting intersection. So, what I've often tried to do and how I've had success is to almost bring those key people together that are able to push and pull certain levers in order to help the organization reach their goals. Because I only wear one hat and it's company logo on it. That's it, right? I am the Switzerland of the organization. I'm always going to have an opinion, but I'm there to support the business. And oftentimes I'm coming with one of the more unique perspectives on what's going on because I'm interacting with all the different key leaders. So there is no silo for procurement. We work in everybody's silos, right? We're all up in everybody's business. And because that's the case, you're able to bring a very unique perspective, to others that you're trying to support. And I do it in authenticity, right? I am me. I show up as me every day. And I think that's just such a key part of it is being your authentic self and having those key critical conversations. Don't try to be somebody else. Even if you're young in career, try to find your voice, right? For those older in career who have found your voice, use your voice. And I think those are really key elements that will help anybody be successful.
Oh my gosh, you just jam-packed like all this stuff into the last 2 minutes. I'm like, how do I even pick that apart to add my commentary? But I will say where you started is one of my key philosophies and actually part of, if you ever hear me talk about our change leadership methodology at Wonder, we have act with authenticity, which you've touched on, right? That's so critically important. It actually scientifically helps people strive to do more and be better in their lives physically and has an impact on the brain. And then you also talked about creating community, bringing people together and finding the best path forward is just phenomenal. So, but there was a lot more that you covered, but those are the two that I picked out.
Awesome.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So Deborah, you're up next. And how do you define inclusive leadership in the context of procurement? And how have you fostered that within your teams?
So for me, inclusive leadership is making sure that the people that work within procurement understand the leadership role they can play in the business, much to what Susan was saying, where we're everywhere. We see everything, at least we should. And the people that work for me have to understand that they have that power and that they should use that power for good and protecting the company and negotiating the right way, and that they should step up and have the opinion. We don't really care who they use unless we have a preferred supplier, but we want them to lead the business to the right answer for themselves, right? And in doing it in an unbiased way, not because I've always worked with this supplier, not because their brother works there or whatever. It needs to be a full-blown formalized process with flexibility and adaptability, right? But they should feel empowered to lead and to help the business do what's best for them.
Yeah. One of my dear friends, I'll just call her Michelle but she taught me once, she said, Amanda, people feel included when they feel safe.
Mhm.
right? Like, and I think that's what you were striving, like everyone should have an opinion. They should be able to a voice of an opinion. And the more that we can foster that type of environment, the better solutions we're going to get to at the end of the day, both for the business and hopefully for the individuals on the team.
Yeah, and I think they need to own that, right? And be
Right.
accountable for that. And I think as procurement, and I don't want to say this holistically, but some of the younger generation coming into procurement are almost afraid to make that decision and own
Yeah.
it. And you've got to teach them how to do that. And it's just show by example. Be that person you want them to be. And you'll get a lot of success out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And I love that we're both back from spring break. So both you and I are like fully refreshed. It's that season of the year. So Kathleen, let's hear from you next about what industry trends do you see shaping the future of procurement, and how are you preparing your teams for those?
Yeah, certainly. There's a lot of trends that are emerging or are even just, maybe midlife cycle and coming more towards maturity. I am not back from spring break, so I am ready for a vacation. But that said, I'm very excited to be here with this fine group of ladies and esteemed professionals. So, what is happening in the industry? And there's a lot. We could all sit here and talk about AI. AI is empowering different technologies and it's empowering procurement too. It's woven into different things like our CLMs, our contract lifecycle management tools, but you can even leverage it safely within your company's ecosystem in different formats like Copilot, GChat. There's a variety of different ways. You're even seeing it peppered into other technologies like RFP tools. So digital transformation, AI is a big piece of what I'm seeing that's out there. Data and analytics is another element that is continuing to be leaned on very heavily, and this shouldn't go away. This to me is very fundamental for a strong procurement team. Making good decisions is having our analytics that drive our knowledge base and our background and help us to make, like I was saying, those good decisions and those thoughtful decisions moving forward. When we renew contracts, what the cadence is, how many contracts, what types of terms we typically see, spend analytics that get woven into that as well. And then another big trend that I think is kind of hitting more of its maturity, but is still out there and is still going to be leaned into, is not just being a task-oriented department, but really being more strategic and looked upon as being strategic with a seat at that table. I just had some great conversations this week with my executive team, and we're talking about what's the vision for this year. When our contract's up for renewal, where can we lean on our vendors to maybe carve out some cost and maybe reopen negotiations? I see that seat getting even bigger as the years go on because it is so critical to an organization's margins and operational value fiscally.
I love all of those examples. And then think about how that's, I think about new people coming in. I have daughters who are teenagers, right? And they've been very clear to me that they don't want anything to do with procurement, but we'll see how that goes. But if they were to go into procurement, think about how different it is for young women, young men coming into procurement, and the skill sets that they're going to need to have. Like I automatically, Kathleen, to your point, think about the data, like the people that they know how to be data scientists and leverage the data, as incomplete as it is, to drive not only to decisions, but faster decisions, like how quickly we're going to be able to move because of those skill sets. It is just absolutely phenomenal to think through and exciting at the same time. Yeah.
Sure it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So Susan, let's go back to you. And we're going to shift a little bit into some of your past experiences around how you navigated traditional barriers or biases as a woman in our field, making your way up to a senior procurement role.
Absolutely. I think as you take your steps in leadership and you start to have folks that you're managing and that you're working with, and you're working cross-functionally with other leadership folks in your organization, you have to speak the culture you want. You got to own it. I think that's kind of the first thing. If you aren't projecting the culture that you want, and you're not speaking truth to that culture, it's just not going to happen. It's a real living, breathing thing. Culture isn't something that goes on a website. It's not, something that's stagnant, that's in the signature of your email. It's something you live every day. And so if you truly believe it and you live it and it's in your heart, you can make it happen, right? You can foster it. And I'll give you a for example. It's interesting. Several years ago, I got a call from a friend to go interview for a job. And they said, come, we'd love to talk to you. It's a great opportunity, growing organization, blah, blah. So I go and I have the interview, and I met with the entire C-suite, and I realized a common theme. Everyone didn't look like me. And it became very obvious very fast that I looked different than every person that I was interviewing with. And I am an ambitious woman. Those of you on the call that know me know that very well. And so I'm always asking the tough questions. I want to know the whys. And one day I want to be a COO. That's a goal, right? And I was interviewing and really liking the culture, and I'm liking everything they're saying. And the webpage looks so great. And then I got to my last interview with the CEO, and I said, hey, let's have a frank conversation. No one here looks like me. And I want to keep rising. I want to get another promotion. I want to keep moving, right? And so I'm going to come in, I'm going to do a great job and do all the things that you all want. But at some point, I'm going to want a promotion, and it doesn't look like that's happening here. And he was like, no. He told me all the things that looked just like the website. And I went home, and I never heard from that company again. 0 times. Couldn't get the recruiter to call me back, nothing. About 3 months later, I got a cold call from a different recruiter for the same role, still open. And they said, we'd love to bring you in for an interview. And I said, let me tell you why I'm not going to interview for this role, because I don't fit the profile of what these folks are looking for. And that's fine. But I had to use my voice to say that. And I had to be able to say it out loud during the process. I had to seek the culture that I was looking for. I had to have the personal courage to stand up and say, I'm a woman. I'm real good at my job. I love my job. I love fostering teams. I love diversity and inclusion within my teams. And I'm going to say that out loud, and that's okay. And if that's not okay for others, then that's all right too. But we need to have the conversation about why that is and how we're going to get to resolution on that. And so I think oftentimes as people, not women, as people, we shy from the difficult conversation. And as I'm becoming more mature in career, which is a nice way to say I'm getting a little older, right? Not being as afraid to have the tough conversation and say, hey, these are things that are important to me from a culture perspective. It is about being a mom. I'm going to want time off to go do the things with my kids when they're having the fun run at school, or go on the BizTown field trip, or, whatever it is. Like, those are things that are important to me. And if I want to be a mom, and I want to be a worker, and I want to be a wife and a daughter, and we have all these hats, and we're in the sandwich generation, we've got parents aging in place, and we've got young children that we're managing, I got to be able to stand up for myself and have that real conversation. And so you got to find culture that fits where you are in your life, and hope that people are going to meet you where you are. So that's kind of how I do things.
Mm-hmm. And being willing to voice that. But also, I think sometimes, at least with some of the women that I've worked with in the past, they haven't taken a moment to define what is important to them. Like, we just
key.
Yeah, because we get so involved in our work and our life, and then we rarely do we take a step back and say, whoa, wait, what am I doing here, and why is it important? And is this still important to me moving forward? Or are things shifting? So,
I did an activity with my team. This is probably 10 years ago, but it still works today.
yeah.
I had everybody fill out an Excel document with 40 hours of work a week, but then we did a second tab in the Excel document of how many hours there are in a day. And I said, block out sleep, block out a church service on a Sunday if that's something that's important to you. Put your children's practices on the schedule, get real with yourself. Can you really take a lunch break every day? I don't know that you can, right? Because maybe your lunch break's when you go grocery shopping, right?
Right.
But get real. Put it in Excel. All of us folks that are kind of, that brain, and it will get very real very fast on how you prioritize. So work-life balance isn't real. It's not real. But prioritization is real. And if you figure out what you got to prioritize, that will help you define what you're looking for, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, we could talk about that for hours. I could go down that rabbit hole really, really quick. Okay. So, but Deborah, pulling us back out of that, and maybe this is part of your advice that you're going to share, but what advice would you give a woman looking to break into leadership positions in procurement and supply chain?
think Susan stole my thunder there. I think for the desire to want to move through procurement, you have to be willing, one, to get your hands dirty, but you've got to be able to lift your head up and see the bigger picture. If you can't see where this task is leading you, then you're always going to be getting your hands dirty. You're just going to do what's in front of you and keep moving forward from one thing to the next. What I had to learn very quickly was that strategic piece, right? And thinking and planning and being just ready for anything. And if your work is not tied to the bigger priorities of the organization, then there's no reason to really be doing it. So you have to really be smart about the things you work on, the things you raise your hand for. Don't be afraid to try something new. Take the risk. If you're not willing to take the risk, you're in the wrong job, because there's so much of it here in this role. I chose to move through the indirect side versus the direct side of this business, because it was more fun. It could be more creative to me. There was more room for trying this and that before you got to the next thing. But then, on the direct side, there may be more fun for somebody else. Like, what you're buying, when you're buying it, how many you're going to buy and when you need it. I think, to me, that's a little bit more stressful because, you got to get product on the shelves, right? But for me, it was really important to find a career that had a fun aspect to it. And I think indirect procurement does that for me. So I'm not sure I have really answered your question.
No, but I think you're a living example of, the advice that you told yourself, right? That you found what you liked in indirect procurement, and you can develop an entire career just staying there. Where others might want to dabble in both or stay in a different lane. So I think the cool thing about procurement is there's so much opportunity now, not only in sourcing. Like, if you wanted just to stay in sourcing, you could do that. But like, my entire career was about transformation, and I haven't negotiated a contract in a corporation in 17 years, but
Wow.
I still say I'm a procurement professional, right? Like that. So there's just so much opportunity to find your path and find what you like within procurement, and not feel like you need to be siloed anywhere. So
Agreed.
it's
I
great.
totally Yep.
Fantastic. Okay. So Kathleen, before we get to your question, a shout out to everyone listening on the live stream. If you have questions for these amazing ladies, we're going to hold some time for the end. So you can ask your questions, or if you have questions now, we'll just layer them in. Jeremy on my team is kind of managing all of that, so we'll get those questions coming in. So feel free to ask a question on the live stream. All right. So Kathleen, let's talk a little bit about risk. Usually in procurement, we don't like risk, right? We're trying to manage risk all the time. But how has your approach to risk taking in procurement paid off in your career?
Ooh, yeah, that's a big question, right? Because you outlined it nicely initially. Is procurement is all about carving out and avoiding the risk, right? The risk mitigators, whether it be within a contract, a vendor selection, making sure that you have a primary, secondary, tertiary vendor. But when I look at my career, I've approached risk taking with a strategic and calculated mindset, trying to balance the potential rewards of taking a step along with the possible downsides of making a decision, right? So within decision making and procurement, that's where some of this could come into the strategic risk reward taking as well. But if I tie that back into my career specifically, taking risks start with raising your hand. Always does. It always says, it's, how can I help? How can I take on more? It's taking on new categories, taking on new departments. But again, it goes back to that measured and calculated risk of, before I raise my hand, do I want to do this? Do I want to do this long term? If this does not work out for me, am I comfortable going back? Can I go back to where I'm at? So before, you take that calculated risk, you got to ask yourself, what are all the scenarios this could fall into? And am I comfortable with the unknown? Because sometimes you can move ahead or take on a new project. Sometimes you get a promotion and you can't go back. So it's looking at that promotion in your hand to say, can I take this on? Is this the right time? And leaning into it.
Oh, I love that. Raising your hand starts with raising your hand. I'm like going to stitch that on a pillow somewhere, I think. Because it's so true, right? And whether like I took a big risk 6 years ago when I started Wonder Services. I was a VP of procurement at MGM, loved my team, loved my boss, loved the company, and I am a single income earner in my household, and I still did it anyway, right? And took the leap of faith because my calculated risk, Kathleen, was I go out and I start my own business and let's just say I fail. Well, worst case scenario, I learned a lot, I met a lot of people, and I'll go back to corporate, right? Like that was my risk calculus.
Yeah, you did your risk analysis, and the
Yeah,
reward was the opportunity to spread your wings. And look at you,
yes,
you're
I know.
succeeding.
Yeah. And I'm showing my kids, I'm showing my girls that that can be done. Right. And that's what motivates me every single day. So yeah, you can take big risks in your careers, whatever that looks like for you. Right. It might not be starting your own company, it might be the next job. Like Susan, you just took a leap of faith into a new job role a couple of months ago. So that is it's all about balancing that risk and how far you want to go. But I'm of the mindset that the more risk you take, the calculated risk, the more adventure you have in life, right? And that's a lot of fun to me.
I think that's beautiful. You only
Yeah.
get one opportunity to walk on this earth. So
Yes.
make it a good one.
Yep. Absolutely. We actually, if I can pause real quick, because we are coming down to the bottom of the hour, we have our first question that came in. Thank you, Sarah, for asking the question. But and this is open for anyone, I believe. If you are trying to build a supply chain network and build trusted relationships with vendors, how do we do this knowing that we need to compete our procurement opportunities? So anyone have experience in balancing building trusted relationships while being effectively able to compete those relationships when you go out to RFP?
Yeah, so my advice is to start with, we're supposed to be that Switzerland and that neutral voice within the room. You can open every call with some banter, with some background, trying to build that bridge and giving them, just a peek behind the curtain of that you're a human being. Maybe you have kids at home, maybe an animal, and trying to get a little more comfortable and personal with them. I know RFPs can feel so cut and dry because they're big, heavy documents that go back and forth. But that right there will help just opening the call softly, and then take one-on-ones with them when you can, just a 30-minute little touch base throughout the process. It is a delicate role that we play. It's a delicate balance because we really are supposed to be, again, Switzerland. We're not making the decision. It's not our money to spend. We're trying to help guide the right decision for the organization that presents the least risk. And of course, at times the lowest cost, right? There's a multiple of factors here. But yeah, just don't be afraid to take those calls on the side.
I'll maybe just add on top of that also that it's different to manage different buckets of vendors too. So you really have to understand your vendor pool and understand who's a strategic vendor, right? Who is somebody that your business is partnered with that, really the thoughts of leaving, not so much. Once you've gotten married to an HCM, divorce is messy and expensive, right? And so the thought is, you're going to go out to market, you're going to make sure your pricing is appropriate, but at the same time, you do want to keep that relationship going because you need the enhancements and you need the extras and you need the service things. So I don't think it has to be a one size fits all approach. You can absolutely partner with a vendor to say, hey, you are a key strategic vendor for our organization. Here's what we expect of you. Give me X% savings every year over year and help me find ways to tweak this contract and tweak our program to ensure that we are not having astronomical costs year over year and I won't have to shop your prices, right? I think some transparency also plays very well. And most of our vendors know we're going to do it anyways. It's not a surprise. So they know that we're going to go to market and make sure that, everybody's being fair. And it's almost commonplace at this point, right? So I think, but understanding your vendor partners and then managing them appropriately based on your organizational goals cannot be underscored when you're talking about vendor management.
Yeah. And I'm just going to add one little add-on to both of these answers is I'm an econ geek. I studied econ in college, and to me, you can build really strong, trusted relationships by understanding incentives, by understanding what's important for the other individuals, which goes right into when you're RFPing, understanding what those incentives are at an individual level and at a corporate level. And it'll go a long way to build those trusted relationships. So I see that as understanding incentives actually is a win-win for both of those challenges.
Yeah, and I would take it one step further, Amanda, is really understanding what's important to them as an organization. So if you're
Yes.
both trying to be strategic partners to one another, it's not all about you. You have to understand what's important to them. And if you can support them and help them in any way, you should, right? And that it's a two-way street.
Okay. All right. And just another call for questions. Sarah, that was an awesome question. You heard from all four of us on those answers. So keep those questions coming in until we get more. We're going to roll forward with a couple set of questions for each of you. Does that sound good? Okay. All right. So next up, Susan, you were next. And here's the word balance, but how do you balance the demands of executive leadership with the need to stay connected to day-to-day procurement operations? And maybe you can expand upon in life too.
Yeah, right. All of the things.
Yes.
So for me, I lead a little differently. I love a passion project. I am a working supervisor. I'm always going to be doing things because I do like to stay really connected with the folks that are pushing all of the buttons to make all of the things happening and understanding. So at R1 right now, fortunately or unfortunately for my marketing team, I am managing all of their contracts. I don't know that they're very happy about that, but I'm all up in their business and I'm loving it because I love marketing. I worked for a manufacturing company that was ink on paper for years. We were a printing company. And so I love marketing. I love print. And so when I started R1, the quickest way to understand kind of how we were doing things was just get assigned category. So I said, okay, I'm going to take over marketing. And that made me get in the systems. It made me get in and, do all of the things that the folks on my teams were doing to really understand how it works. How do we engage with legal? How do we engage with finance? What does our stakeholder engagement look like? So I think that allows me to move very nimbly through the organization if you're actively working projects on occasion, to really speak to all levels of the organization, both in procurement, as well as within the stakeholder groups, to hear and keep a pulse on kind of what's going on. So in my opinion, I like to get in the weeds on occasion. In previous roles, I was full procure to pay. Now they would not let me hit the pay button in accounts payable, but I'd get darn close. On an occasion, I would work the vendor aged. Everybody would get terrified when I'd get in there to do it once a quarter. But it was just a good exercise for me to get in and make sure I had a good pulse on what was going on with key vendor partners, what was happening with invoices, all of the things, right? The other thing I try to do is a skip level. I love a skip level. And at least once a year, that's not a award-winning goal, but it's a goal at least once a year. I try to get every single person in my downline in a 15 to 30-minute call. How you doing? What's going on? How's your family? How's your pets? All the things we've been talking about. How do you like your job? Where do you want to go from here? What's working? What's not working? Do you have the tools you need to be successful? All of those things, right? And the little nuggets that come out of those skip levels, they are magical. They really are. And again, you meet people where they are. You're authentic when you have those conversations. And it really does allow you to build that bridge of open communication. We can all say it all day long, I have an open door policy, blah, blah, whatever. But until people actually speak to you and actually see the door open, they don't believe it, right? So you kind of have to lead first. And so I put the olive branch out. I do the meetings with everybody. I sit through and try to get those little nuggets. And then it does open a really good door, and it provides a nice cadence for folks to be able to kind of talk to you. And then it helps make sure that messaging is consistent. If everybody in your team's telling you they need a second monitor, get a second monitor. If that's the thing that's killing everybody at home, right? To work more efficiently, those are easy problems to fix. But if people are afraid to raise their hand or frankly not sure how to do that, sometimes the biggest barriers in people's jobs is just they don't know where to go, especially in this new work from home environment. If you work for a big corporation, that can feel very overwhelming. And so it's almost like going on a listening tour with your team. So that's kind of how I've bridged some of those gaps.
Oh, I love that. A listening tour.
A
We're gonna,
listening tour. That's my new
we're
favorite.
also going to put that down
Yes.
as a key learning, a listening tour. Okay. All right. And then Deborah and Kathleen, I'm actually we have a list of questions that we're running through, but I'm gonna skip down to the last two because I think they're really important to cover on the call today. So just FYI, if you're like, where is she coming from? So just a quick heads up. So Deborah, on this next question, I always think it's important to learn from all experiences, whether they were great or maybe one that you're like, well, that was a really strong lesson learned. So can you tell us about a time when you had a setback in your career that ultimately led to greater success and insight?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we all have them. The different degrees of issues and being good versus bad. So I had an experience at an organization where I was constantly being told I was their first choice. They were so happy to have me, loved having me. I was doing a great job. I was doing a great job. Come fast forward a few years into the role, I was given a not so good performance review without any explanation as to what was missing until after the fact. Very surprised by it. And all the things he was saying that I didn't do as in that role, I felt I was doing, right? So that was, a big blow.
Yeah.
But it was probably something I wasn't promoting about myself. I wasn't telling anyone I was doing. I was doing it on the side with my business partners, one-on-one, and maybe not at the level that he would have thought I should have been doing at. So when I went to the next organization, I took that learning and I was better at self-promoting because of it. And fast forward, now I'm a director, right? So it was something I had to learn the hard way because I thought I was doing it and apparently I wasn't doing it. So I think it's really important that we take those lessons and we turn them around to a more positive, positive story for ourselves, and we learn from it and we grow from it. So as much as I think of that as a negative experience, it really was a positive one because I got to where I wanted to be. I'm in a much better place.
Good, good. And maybe some of you listening today have heard me talk about pie. I don't actually love eating pie, but a lot of people like eating pie, but this is not that. It is around self-development. And your example is really about that. Pie is performance, image, and exposure. And your example, you could have been performing very, very well, but maybe lacking on your image and your exposure to that performance, and it impacted your career success. So I always encourage women in particular to be thinking about all three of those areas as part of their development and their plan of attack, of how they present themselves each and every day. So great learning. And it reminds us all that everything in life happens for you, not to you. Right? You made it a for you. And look at you now. Now you're sharing your story so everyone else can learn from it too.
Yep, for
That's
sure.
amazing. Okay. So Kathleen, unless there's another question that comes in, hopefully maybe somebody out there has another question, but you're going to round us out, Kathleen, today, with ultimately kind of a look ahead, right? So looking ahead, what's one change you hope to see for women in procurement leadership? And how are you personally helping make that happen?
Oh, that's a big question. It's a great one, though. I would like to see greater representation of women in leadership seats. Just look at these fine ladies on this panel today. It's taken me a long time in my career to be in a call like this with more women because we are few and far in between. I was at my last company, which is a Fortune 500 company, the first woman ever to lead the indirect team. And that says a lot. That says that we need to pull each other up and support each other and help anyone who's interested in getting into this space because it is a very male dominated industry. help to coach them and develop them and give them the tools, the pie, as you just nicely said, understanding, their performance, their image, and their, what was the third?
Exposure.
Exposure. Thank you. How they're looking in the organization. So that's really what I would love to see is more women in leadership seats. And how I'm trying to support that is by coaching and developing women that I see that dip their toe or come into the department. That could be anything from giving them a new challenge and maybe supporting them and riding on a little bit more and a little bit closer to help them learn that space and help them develop, whether it be a new category or a new capability before they, just get kicked out to run on their own. Also includes trying to raise my hand and hear of opportunities and get them face time across a business. I just found out internally we have this development program for emerging leaders. And so I have this lovely lady on my team who has earned this opportunity. She's incredible. And so I'm charging ahead, trying to make sure she gets a seat at that table. So I'm really working to be an advocate for other women.
I love that. And I think we can all, at least early on in my career, there was such a scarcity mindset when it came to women. And it was almost like we were competing with each other because we knew that if we were going to get a leadership position, there would be one of them. Right. And we were all trying to struggle to get to that. I think so many more leaders like you, Kathleen, are breaking down those barriers and saying, no, we're going to be able to do so much more if we can uplift each other and advocate for each other versus feeling like we need to be competitive with each other. Now, I will have one additional ask if we think about where we want to go into the future. I would love all women in procurement to start calling out things that are complete BS, right? That we've been told all of our lives, and I'll just give you one example here. The work-life balance, as Susan mentioned. I mean, seriously, total
Joke.
fallacy. Right? It's a joke. And we were told early in our careers to strive for this balance. And I think the more that we can be real with each other and call those things out to say, you know what, that actually doesn't work. And we should start thinking about this differently and thinking about it as priority setting and truly understanding your why so you know how you show up each day versus trying to find a mythical balance. So let's speak the truth. Let's advocate for each other, uplift each other, but let's stop chasing unicorns too at the same time. Does that sound good? Can we all do that?
I love it.
Totally agree with that.
I would be a happy lady if we could. All right. So I want to thank each and every one of you, Deborah, Susan, Kathleen. You are amazing individuals, amazing women in procurement. So honored to have you in my network. So honored to have you here today to share your careers. If you don't know each of these individuals on the team today, for those that are listening, please feel free to reach out to them on LinkedIn. Let's build a community and learn from each other. If we can do that, we're going to be in a great spot here, not only for our careers, but for the people that are coming along behind us. So thank you again for everything today, and cheers. Have a great day.